it's really, really important that people fill their time with other activities. And that's one of the hardest things is people forgot how to enjoy life. I had a session earlier this afternoon with a patient of mine, adolescent, who really struggles to find value in life in activities that are non-tech based. Even going for a walk, wanting to play Pokemon Go, you know, like needing a screen at all times. That for this fear of boredom, which boredom is a good thing, but younger generation especially sees boredom as a bad thing.
Hello and welcome to the Cardinal Way for Men. My name is Ed Cardinal, and I'm always looking and exploring for great guests to have on my podcast. And I was searching through LinkedIn and I saw the bio of my guest today, Dr. Weissman. And the thing he's a clinical psychologist, but the thing that jumped out at me was that he specializes in digital addiction. So I thought he would be a great guest to bring on to my show, particularly because my mission is to help men recovering from alcoholism. So welcome, Dr. Weissman.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's start with that. I think that's a great segue because that's the thing that really jumped out at me when I saw your biographical information that you do specialize in digital addictions. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so I started with my dissertation was my first step into it. I wrote my dissertation on basically the impacts of playing massively multiplayer online role-playing games or MMORPGs on subjective sense of connectedness with others. So
Yeah.
basically, social factors in online gaming. We start dissertation topics early and in grad school, so I worked on it for quite a few years. What led me to that though was I was seeing this trend of problems with internet gaming. This was during the World of Warcraft time. So people were, playing it too much, and there wasn't much research out at that point. So as I was researching it, there was more and more and more research coming out as I was doing my research. And then as I, finished my dissertation and published it, I decided I can either go family forensics, which would be like child custody evaluations. That's what I would have been geared up for, but they get sued a lot, so I don't want to do that. Uh, then my other option would have been going into neuropsychology, which I did actually for a little bit. It's some neuropsych assessments, working on private practice for a while.
Mhm.
And my other option was gaming addiction treatment, or which I then expanded to all internet addictions. So actually, for a while, I was doing both the neuropsych and the gaming addiction. I came up with the whole subfield of psychology called cyber neuropsychology. So I founded a subfield of psychology in that process, working with my supervisor at the time, Dr. Janine Beisman, and her specialty in pediatric neuropsych. Uh, and then my specialty with all this research and treatment I was doing at the time on gaming addiction, internet addictions, excessive screen time, problematic internet use, lots of terminology. So yeah, combine them together, created a 6 session treatment model called CyberSense Power Up. Um, that's what I decided to call it. Then I made a podcast, same name, and did 19 episodes. So not ongoing like yours. And then yeah, it was good. I don't use the model so much anymore because I'm not trying to do short-term treatment with my patients. I want it to be a longer term thing. I think they need more time than just 6 sessions.
Yeah.
But it was just something that we were kind of toying with at the time.
Mhm.
I think the model was based off, which was like more of a 22 session model, based off some research out of France or Spain, actually I think Spain, that was geared more to 22 modalities. But yeah, so over time evolved into me practicing in that field and a lot of overlap with men's issues. We talk about men and higher percentage of men that struggle with their internet use when it comes to gaming, when it comes to porn,
Yep.
and uh, maybe a little overlap on the streaming. But then when you get to social media, it's much more of a female-oriented problem.
Okay. And are they're reaching out to you for help, or I mean, obviously it's probably not going to be court ordered, but or is it like their family members are telling them they should do something about their addiction.
Yeah, more often than not, it's for adolescents, it's their family members.
Yeah.
They might be struggling academically, emotionally, and sometimes there's a call for help, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes the parents are just like, "This is just too much. That's not okay."
Yeah.
Uh, but with the adults, oftentimes the adults are bringing themselves in. More
Mm,
often than not, they'll bring themselves in.
yeah.
So the outlier would be the adult who's brought in by family, and then the adolescent who comes in on their own.
Mm,
Those would be the rare ones, but they do happen too.
mhm.
The adolescents who come in on their own for treatment have the highest percentage of success because they're motivated already. They
Yeah.
want to improve. They want to change. They just need the resources and support.
Yeah.
The majority of the adolescents who come in that don't think they have a problem or don't want to change struggle the most. They hold on to it the longest,
Right.
and their chances of success are way lower than their peers.
Mm,
And then for the adults, no one's dragging them. No one can drag an adult to therapy.
yeah.
So if they come in for a session or two, and they're like, "No, I don't want to do this," then they're gone.
Right.
But for the most part, they want to be there.
Right. With, and I'm just thinking about similarities or differences between alcohol addiction. What is it with, let's talk about men who struggle with digital addiction. What is it usually that makes them realize that they have a problem with it?
Well, I think you'll see it impacting other parts of their lives
Mhm.
and ruminating thoughts over it, obsessing about it, just becomes all consuming.
Yeah.
So that's with any addiction.
Right.
And it's because it's tapping into the mesolimbic dopaminergic pathway. And that's where we see the addiction start to form. And that's our reward pathway in our brain. So when we're stimulating it repeatedly, 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 we need more and more of it. So we see, satiation, tolerance, and the absence will have withdrawal. So that's going to be across the spectrum, whatever addiction you're struggling with. So
Right.
there's a lot of overlap with alcoholism in that regard.
Yeah.
Then as it evolves, it then goes up the mesocortical pathway. And now it becomes much more of a whole brain issue. And there's other factors that are going on, such as too much glutamate and brain cells essentially being attacked by themselves. And we will have that, disrepair and disarray. So one thing we want to make sure that we do is to wean them off and allow the brain to use its miraculous ability for neuroplasticity to
Yeah.
rebuild those brain cells and those pathways. The one thing I talk about with regular addiction, whatever it is, alcohol or with digital, you're putting a detour sign up. That pathway is still there.
Yes.
So it takes a concerted effort to go around it. Once you take that detour sign off, imagine getting on a freeway that's just wide open. There's no car on it at all. It's like, woohoo, this is great
Yeah.
again. I love this. I get places so much faster. I'm feeling wonderful versus taking the side streets. But it's the side streets, the detours that are going to keep you healthy, keep you thinking. Uh, yeah, unfortunately, those pathways are still there. It's like riding a bike, right?
Yes.
You have that pathway still there, even if you haven't done it in a long time. You might wobble a little bit at the beginning, but you figure it out real quick. So we still have those pathways in our brain with addiction, and it's really important to be aware of it.
Mm.
Uh,
With alcohol and other drug addictions, that you're taking a chemical, you're drinking alcohol. With digital addiction, on some level, I'm sure there's still release. You talked about the brain. I'm sure there's still release of chemicals and hormones that are addicting.
Yeah, we know it's with gaming addiction.
Yeah.
That's by of the addictions by the highest release of dopamine
Yeah.
of the other digital addictions, just because it's so highly engaging.
Yeah.
So you're having a massive flux of dopamine release, and it takes a while for the brain to cool down. I recommend like 20 minutes of just a cool down period from ending of gaming before going into another activity.
Right.
With different drugs or substances, you're going to be releasing different chemicals.
Right.
So yeah, there will be some level of difference in that because sometimes there will be uppers, sometimes will be downers.
Right.
Like alcohol is going to be a downer. Um, Cocaine is an upper. So, like meth, cocaine, those gonna be a little more similar to what you might experience in the brain, how it lights up as you would see with a gaming addiction, but
Do you,
not the same for alcohol use.
Right. Do you see a correlation between uh, mental health issues and digital addictions or other addictions? It's like a coping mechanism for mental health issues.
I actually don't see it. Well, I don't see a correlation with the one I do with adults might be with like cannabis use
Yeah.
and and maybe social media,
Hmm.
but not necessarily gaming because it's probably gonna be disadvantageous to the gamer to have their brain reaction time slowed to be a functioning as a gamer. Depends on the type of game, of course. So if it's like, fast paced and your reaction time slowed with cannabis, then probably not going to help you out.
Hmm.
But those are the only ones I've probably really seen in my practice, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, and I don't see other substances being paired with other digital addictions. Typically, it
Mhm.
might be one or the other.
Right.
Uh, the overlap might be cannabis, just because if you're looking at the college age population, it's appro age appropriate for them to be doing both those activities.
Hmm. So when, let's say, a man comes to you for digital addiction, what are some of the things, the coping mechanisms that you're teaching him in the process of his getting away from that addiction and getting healthier?
Yeah. So, I mean, somebody's coming to me, they might be online, engaged online, not just watching TV or on their computer, uh, 60 hours a week, 40 hours a week, maybe even up to 80 hours a week or more. I've seen in the hundreds, I think. It's kind of remarkable how they find the time.
Sure.
But when it's at that really high level, it's about, weaning off
Yeah, yeah,
to get down to a more appropriate. But you're asking how do they get the hours down? It's not by taking it away; it's by filling it with something else.
yeah,
If you take away, think about like digging a hole in sand to the beach. If you just dig, well, you have sand falling in, right? So you have to keep digging out the sand that's falling in. But if you have it filled with something, like if you're digging a hole in general and you fill it with something, then it's not going to allow as much for things to fall in. There's
right,
less room for it to fall in.
right.
So it's really, really important that people fill their time with other activities. And that's one of the hardest things is people forgot how to enjoy life. I had a session earlier this afternoon with a patient of mine, adolescent, who really struggles to find value in life in activities that are non-tech based. Even going for a walk, wanting to play Pokemon Go, like needing a screen at all times that for this fear of boredom, which boredom is a good thing, but younger generation especially sees boredom as a bad thing. I think that's more actually an age thing where maybe teenagers now and young adults now fear the boredom, but our digital immigrants, like you and me, who are a little older, they're more comfortable with being bored. They've been bored in life and they know it's not the end of the world.
And I think spending time, I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time in nature by myself, exploring,
Mhm.
taking walks, and uh, I didn't see that as boredom, but I think it was just it's good to have alone time. But
Yeah.
I'm hearing that young men in particular are really struggling because they've spent so much time, on the internet and on their phones that they really don't know how to have social relationships in person. I don't
Hmm.
know. Are you finding that?
Yeah, the younger they are, especially the more digital native they are,
Yeah.
the more they do struggle
Yeah.
with that. Not everybody, of course, but the
Hmm.
ones who are struggling in this area do seem to have a more challenging time than maybe their predecessors. So somebody who's been addicted to something, or if it's been digitally addicted, having a really hard time with that quiet.
Mm.
And it could be other things that pop in their head, and that's why, for example, I see alcoholism.
Yeah.
A lot of people will drink to avoid feeling
Yeah.
and specifically to avoid feeling uncomfortable or painful feelings.
Right.
So with digital natives that are avoiding their feelings with constantly being engaged or entertained by their device, then they're not allowing them to build up that mental resolve to
Right.
sit in silence, to be with nature.
Right.
Yet when they do it, they can enjoy it.
Right.
I think the build up is much more of a terrifying or uncomfortable thing. Like, that doesn't sound good to me at all. I'd rather just sleep
Hmm.
because they're not getting enough sleep either.
Right. Because they're gaming on that. I mean, that's 80 to 100 hours. I mean, that's a lot of hours. The I was wondering about what sort of things that you work on having them replace. What are some of the other pathways that you have them start to explore a little bit more to replace the digital time.
The one that has to always be there is physical exercise,
Yep.
fitness,
Yeah.
in whatever way they want to do it. If it's walking, if it's riding a bike, if it's playing a sport, just getting outside. Well, not even getting outside. Ideally, getting
Yes.
outside.
Yeah.
I suggest at least 15 minutes a day of sunshine. But if they can't get outside for one reason or another, then something physical, maybe a rowing machine, Peloton, exercise bike, that's not a Peloton, treadmill. If they have weights, sign up for a gym, get a trainer. Sometimes I'll have them read books to help inspire them to do that.
Yeah.
I really like Restart Level Up Plus One by, I always mess up his last name, but Dan Siguralinov. Uh, it's really fascinating in that game. In the book, he talks about it's a fantasy novel, well, sci-fi novel. Uh, the main character gets AI installed in his brain that allows him to interface and level himself up. So he smokes a cigarette and tells him toxins introduced to system, debuff added. He goes for he has a coffee, and buff added. He goes for a run and eventually he levels up his vitality or his stamina or his speed. He reads a book, he levels up his reading abilities. So all these things that we do in life, but without the whole, HUD system where we could see what's going on, it's there, but we look in the mirror to see those results.
Right.
Or we just perform better, but there's no clear marker. Oh, you've leveled up.
Hmm.
But I do like how the book gamifies the ability to do that.
Right. Right. Click the link in the description to receive your free ultimate guide for men over 45, unlocking the 10 secrets to a fulfilling life. You're talking about how, and we'll keep the focus on men, how they use
Mhm.
addictions to deal with feelings and emotions. And I believe because of cultural conditioning, we as men are taught that expressing emotions and feelings is a sign of weakness. So it doesn't surprise me that we then tend to go in another direction to sort of deal with that and cover those feelings and emotions up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's spot on. A lot of men have been, told to not feel emotions, or it wasn't necessarily told not to, but just not given the opportunity to
Right,
express themselves and their emotions. Man up,
right, right. Yeah,
things along those lines. A good book for that one is No More Mr. Nice Guy. I don't agree with everything in the book, but I like how I think it's Dr. Glover uh, talks about how we got to be that way, especially looking at who raised men,
yeah,
women.
yeah.
Women have been raising men. At home, you have typical female caregiver,
Right,
not always, of course. Um, and then you have them go to elementary school where you might have one male teacher at most for most elementary schools. Uh, and then those are those primary years where you would learn to communicate emotion and so forth. But there's no male role model. If you go back further in time, you're looking at, boys go with their fathers to work, and they learn apprenticeships and so forth. Modern education is modern. It's actually a new concept if you look at human history. It's only
right.
been around since like the early 1900s, I believe. Maybe late 1800s in terms of like formal education for everybody. A
Yeah,
lot of kids would go work in factories
yeah,
with dad
yeah.
or wherever they would be.
Right,
But
right.
we don't have that anymore. And there might be something that's lost. I don't necessarily think that it means there's something that's lost, but I do like how the book kind of addresses it. Well, this is a possible way that we have in that book kind of focuses more on putting raising women to another level because we're always trying to please women, get good grades to get positive feedback from mom, whatever it is. Dad's just not around as much. Uh, so yeah, there are some things with men, different ways to kind of understand how we got there, and other ways to get back in touch with our either manhood, but also with our emotions
Right,
at an appropriate level.
right. Are you finding that with the younger generation of boys and young men, is that trend changing? Be-
I'm not sure. I
Mm,
see a very selective group in my practice, so I don't
mhm,
have a good sampling to give an
mm,
accurate answer on that.
yeah, because one thing I noticed with my wife's nieces and nephews who now have their own children,
Mm.
I see her nephews as much more engaging, much more available fathers. And they're probably in their 30s, let's say. And
Okay.
it's really nice to see much more affectionate with their sons, much more involved with them, with their after school activities, helping them with homework, which is, like you were talking about, our mothers used to be the ones that did
Hmm.
most of that, but it's really refreshing to witness that. And and I believe that those boys will be much healthier and much well-rounded because of that.
Yeah, love a male role model that showed them that it's okay to express emotion and to communicate and to be supportive and loving.
Right.
I imagine that will be the case for them.
Yeah. Do you think it's important to have some sort of a support network built in for the men that you work with who have digital addictions? Are there support groups out there available, or do you run uh, group therapy, anything like that?
I do run some groups.
Yeah.
Currently, working on starting two. One is for men's issues group.
Okay.
I don't have any currently for digital addiction.
Hmm.
I've tried getting them going in the past, but I couldn't get enough people interested to join, or maybe people weren't sharing it widely enough. So I never really actually got a tech addiction support group or something along those lines. And it was navigating the balance of tech use group. I never got one of those up and running, which I really wish I did. But I've had men's groups successfully, and that's why I'm going to start. I'm working on starting another one soon. It's just a matter of getting groups are always difficult to get going.
Yeah.
But
Particular.
yeah, there's no resources to answer your question that I know of
Yeah.
anywhere for that are in like you know in that format, unless you're going to an IOP at a very unique program like Restart Recovery up in Washington,
Mhm.
or one of the other facilities that does have specialized treatment for digital addictions.
Mhm. What is the focus of your men's groups? Why did you feel the need to have start a men's group?
So I started doing that when I was in my first postdoc position under Dr. Michael Prieser,
Hmm.
and he specializes in men's issues. Um, so working with him, I started doing men's group, and I really enjoyed it. So I did one more after, and then this will be probably, I guess, the third iteration that I'm gonna do. And they're closed groups,
Yeah,
so it's not an ongoing one.
yeah.
It's as long as it needs to last. And uh, that may have diverted a little bit from your actual question,
No,
but
no, no, absolutely
okay.
not. And how many men do you have in those groups?
I aim for 6 to 8.
Perfect.
Sometimes we get a little drop off right at the beginning just
Yeah.
because of whatever reasons, and then trying to get some people to come back in is always tough. But
Hmm.
yeah, aim for 6 to 8. The one I had when I was working with Dr. Breezer was up there. The second one I had out in my area, Westlake Village, California, was I think we had about four or so that it dropped down to. But I'm not going to start this one until we get up to at least six,
Yeah.
because I imagine we might drop off a few in the beginning too. I'd like to get to 8 and then start with that,
Hmm.
so that if it drops down to 6, we're still okay.
Hmm.
And that's just based off of Yalom's group. He's the expert when it comes to group therapy and
Yeah.
wrote the book on it. And his suggestion and recommendation for 6 to 8, because and I've experienced this. If you have too many, none people don't get enough individual time.
Right.
And if you have too few, then you have too much individual time,
Right. Right.
not enough group involvement. You
Yeah.
need a group, you need the support.
Right.
So six to 8 is that magic number you want to aim for.
Hmm.
If you're at 6, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And
And,
that's not
and
including me.
right. Are they topic led, or is it whatever men need to discuss on that any given time?
My typical format would be going around what's going on each week. Everybody gets to
Mhm.
check in, see if there's
Yeah.
any themes that we
Yeah.
could hit. If multiple people are having the same issue, but let's say it's the same group of people, then I'll make sure everybody does get to whatever it is that they're working on,
Yeah.
whether it's from their original goals for being in the group or whatever they're struggling with that particular week. But there's always something.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you see common themes amongst men uh, of what they're struggling with?
Yeah, but also I think depends on the nature of the group.
Yeah.
That's why I'll often interview people in the group, make sure it's gonna be right fit.
Hmm.
But yeah, there'll be common themes that you'll have come up,
Hmm.
but every once in a while you have things that are specific or unique to something that happened.
Right. Yeah. How about mindfulness? Is that something that you incorporate in your treatment, like
Uh,
breathing,
mhm.
meditation, and how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I always recommend my patients use Insight Timer because it's got like 100,000 free download. Meditations downloads on there.
Yep.
If they have access to Calm, I like the intro of 7 Days to Calm. I think it's a good just here's how to meditate. People that are into books and podcasts, I'll suggest Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
Yep.
He's got a podcast too. I think it's
Yep.
really good. His experience and how he talks about it, I think it's really insightful and helpful with
Yeah.
understanding meditation.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also one other one, but I'm blanking on his name right now.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's incredibly important because especially with the digital addictions, the mindfulness and meditation are helpful for strengthening the brain, that mental resolve to be able to sit quietly and to be in calm. When I do meditations with my patients in session, which I do, uh, I love asking them, how long do you think that was? And then seeing the disparity because their perception of time is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
One part of our brain, which is the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, pretty much like right here above your left eye,
Hmm.
that gets really highly engaged with gaming and probably other addictions as well. And also just when you're having fun, the whole adage time flies when you're having fun. It's engaging that part of your brain.
Right.
So the perception of time is different.
Yeah.
So that's why if you're trying to tell somebody, hey, you got to finish this game, we got to go in 20 minutes. You come back later, 20 minutes later and say, all right, get off now. It's like, well, it's only been like a minute. Yeah. That's what it feels like to them.
Yes. Yeah.
Versus if you sit there and stare at the clock for 1 minute, it might feel like 20.
Right.
So uh, being able to do that, to sit, to let your brain slow down, it's really
Right.
important and helpful for people, especially any addiction, really,
Right.
because how antsy we can get sitting with ourselves and being able to strengthen our brain to say no to ourselves
Yeah.
is important when temptation comes. I like to think of, and I talked about having a mental reservoir.
Yeah.
Every time we walk by something and we say no to something, like you're walking by some candy or some sweets, and you say, no, I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have it. But at the end of the day, our resolve is drained. So we have our vice, we have the candy, we have a drink, we have whatever it is. We lie to ourselves sometimes saying, oh, it's to take off the edge, but really it's just we are drained with our ability to say no.
Right. So we start
So
bargaining. We start bargaining.
yeah. So what's helpful for that is setting ground rules,
Yeah.
hard and fast rules. I don't drink or I don't eat past like 9 p.m.
Right.
If you figure out when, oh, 9:30, that's when I really just can't say, anymore. I can't say no. But it's after 9, I can't do it tonight. For
Yeah.
me, once I brush my teeth, I'm not eating or drinking anything else that night.
Right.
Because I do floss, can't drink for or eat or drink for 30 minutes anyway.
Right.
Or not floss, mouthwash.
Yeah.
So I'm done.
Right.
I just clean my teeth. I'm not gonna do that again.
Right.
So every night, once I've done that, it's like, nope, done. Not going to eat or
Yeah.
drink anything else.
Yeah.
But having some kind of rules and then also other markers might help in that regard.
Right. Yes, setting up a routine is
Hmm.
important. And that routine has boundaries and rules, and I mean, you don't want to be too rigid about it, but it's important to have some. I totally agree. And then, in my wellness coaching with men recovering from alcoholism, I incorporate the mindfulness, uh, proper nutrition. You talked about sleep, getting good night's sleep, exercise, breathing. Breathing exercises, I think, are so important to help maybe break that thought pattern by focusing on something else. I mean, that's what meditation is, but I think the breathing is a good component to incorporate too.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So Dr. Weissman, if someone wanted to contact you, how could they do so?
You can email me, weissmanpsychology@gmail.com.
Okay,
WEISSMAN psychology.
okay,
And then my website, Dr. Weissman Psychology. So same, just DR, then weissmanpsychology.com.
okay,
And that has my contact information.
okay. And I'll post that in the description so people who are watching this will have access to that. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Weissman. Very, very informative. I learned a lot, and I knew I would because I didn't know anything about digital addiction, and I do see a pretty significant crossover with other addictions, but also unique in its
Hmm.
own way. So, well, I appreciate the work you're doing with men and women and young adults, and I wish you the best. And thanks again for being a guest on my podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the work you're doing and for doing interviews like this that are helping to educate and inform people as well.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. If you like that video, check out my other video on the importance of joining a men's group.